Peter Zeihan, an expert in studying different parts of the world, talks to us about the people and lands in the Middle East and North Africa MENA. Peter shares detailed information about how the land and weather in these regions have affected the way people live and grow their food. He tells us that these areas are mostly dry with large deserts, and only a few places have enough water for people to live, and farm places near rivers, like the Nile, Tigris, and Euphrates, are where most people have settled. Peter talks about how in the past, the tough land made it hard for people to live and farm, but changes like new farming, technologies in the 1900s, and the discovery of oil helped these places grow. And Advanced Peter explains these ideas in a way that helps us see the big picture of how life in the MENA regions has changed over time. He prepares us to understand more about how these areas grew, problems they face today, and what might happen to them in the future due to changes in the world, technology and politics, geographical and agricultural constraints. In MENA, Peter Zeihan talks about the tough natural conditions in the Middle East and North Africa and how these affect the lives of the people living there. He explains that the areas are mostly made of deserts and dry lands with very little water, making it difficult for plants to grow and people to live in many parts. He says that most people in these regions live close to the few rivers, like the Nile, Tigris, and Euphrates, because these places have water and good land for farming. Historically, life and farming have been quite hard in these regions because of the lack of water and fertile soil. Peter also shares that things started to change a bit in the 1900s when new technologies and artificial fertilizers came. These changes helped the people grow more food and supported a larger population. But despite these improvements, it's still tough to compare the MENA regions to other more fertile and favorable parts of the world. His talk helps us understand the big challenges that the geography and lack of good farming lands bring to the people living in these areas: population patterns and carrying capacity. Peter Zeihan talks about how many people live in the Middle East and North Africa MENA and how the land can support them. He tells us that in the past, these places didn't have many people because the land is mostly desert and it's hard to grow food. People lived where there was water, like near rivers, so there were many people in a few areas. He also says that things changed in the 1900s when new ways of farming came, and oil was found. The oil brought a lot of money to these places. This let them buy food from other countries, so more people could live there even if the land couldn't produce enough food. But Peter also says this made these places rely a lot on the outside world for food and other things. Peter warns that depending too much on things from outside can bring problems if something goes wrong in the world and it becomes hard to get food from other places. These areas could face big challenges because they have more people than the land can naturally support. Peter helps us understand the changes and challenges in these areas related to people and the land they live on, industrialization and population expansion. Peter Zeihan talks about how the Middle East and North Africa MENA areas changed because of new industries and finding oil before these changes. It was hard for many people to live in these places because of the dry lands. And limited farming, people usually stayed near rivers or places where they could grow food. Peter says that things started to change in the 1900s when new tools and ways of farming came, and people found oil in these areas. The oil brought a lot of money, and new farming ways helped grow more food. This allowed more people to live in these places because they could buy food from other countries. Peter tells us that because of oil money and buying food from outside, more people could live in these areas than before. But this also made these places very dependent on the outside world for food and important needs. Peter's talk helps us understand how new industries and oil money helped these areas grow, but also made them more connected and dependent on the rest of the world. Dependency on imported food. Peter Zeihan talks about how the Middle East and North Africa depend a lot on bringing in food from other parts of the world. These places are mostly deserts, and it's tough to grow enough food there for everyone. But when these countries found oil, they started making a lot of money. They used this money to buy food from other countries this way. Even though their own lands couldn't produce enough, they could still feed all the people living there by using the oil money. Peter explains that this system of using oil money to buy food works, but it also has risks if something goes wrong in the world, like wars, bad weather, or other problems. And it becomes hard to buy food from outside. These places could face big troubles. Peter thinks this heavy reliance on outside food mixed with many people living there could lead to unstable and risky situations in the future. According to his analysis, demographic vulnerability, Peter Zeihan talks about the problems that come from the way people are spread out in terms of age in the Middle East and North Africa. He says that there are many young people and not as many older people. A lot of young people means that a lot is being bought and used up, and prices go up because there are so many people wanting the same things. Most of the money and power are held by a few people at the top. So many young people don't have much. Peter explains that because these young people don't have a lot to lose, it can make the country politically shaky or unstable. These areas also rely a lot on buying food from other places because they can't make enough themselves. If something bad happens to the world's buying and selling system, or if they have trouble selling their oil, these places could face big problems, like food shortages and more political troubles. Peter believes that the way people are spread out in ages combined with their reliance on outside resources could cause big upsets and hardships in these places, political and economic instabilities. Peter Zeihan talks about the problems in the Middle East and North Africa. He says there are a lot of troubles because only a few older people have most of the money and power, while there are many young people without much money or chances to get good jobs. This makes the young people unhappy and causes problems in the countries. Also, these places make money by selling oil and use that money to buy food from other countries. But if something bad happens, like oil prices go down, or it becomes hard to buy things from other countries, these places could have big problems because they rely so much on oil money to buy food. Zeihan also says that these places only focus on making money from oil and haven't made other parts of their economy strong. They haven't made schools better or built good roads and buildings. This makes these places more likely to face big problems and makes it hard for them to become stable and successful. Labor and immigration trends in wealthy Middle Eastern countries. Peter Zeihan talks about jobs and people coming from other countries to work in rich Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. He says these countries have a lot of money because of oil, and they use this money to hire people from outside for many kinds of work, such as building roads and other big projects, because these countries hire many foreign workers. There are many more young men living in these places. Zeihan says that many of these workers don't have good jobs or places to live, making life hard for them. In some countries like Qatar and the UAE, foreign workers are a big part of the people living there. Zeihan thinks that having so many workers from other places can change these countries a lot and can also affect their relationships with other countries. Zone's words help us see that oil money changes how these countries operate and their societies, making them rely a lot on people coming from outside to work potential. Geopolitical impacts. Peter Zeihan talks about how the future might look for Middle Eastern countries based on their current situation. He explains that these countries make a lot of money from oil. This money has allowed more people to live there because they can buy food from other places. But this also makes these countries vulnerable. If something bad happens globally that affects their ability to sell oil or buy food, it could cause big problems like widespread hunger and instability. He also mentions that some rich countries in the region, like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, depend a lot on workers coming from other countries. This situation also affects their relationships with other nations and makes their position uncertain. Zeihan suggests that all these issues could lead to difficult times ahead for these countries, with chances of political unrest and social problems. His words help us understand that the Middle East's future might face many challenges based on how things are going now. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Thanks for watching.